G'day, g'day, wherever you are in this multiverse. Welcome to Mastering Music, Mastering Life. Tony Jack the Bear Mance, your host as usual from my home studio, Deluxe Mastering in Melbourne, Australia. And before we start, I just got to get this out of the way very quickly. Special thanks to my sponsor, Omega BJJ MMA in Collingwood. Thank you very much for your support. So for those of you who are interested in coming down and training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, grappling, wrestling, kickboxing, anything like that, whether you want to fight at elite level or just come for fun and fitness, we're a great, friendly club. We welcome you down there at 6 Down Street in Collingwood. Come and see George Soteropoulos. My man, got a lot of experience in the UFC. He's a fantastic teacher. Makes it fun, makes it interesting, and we'd love to see you down there. You can get 2 free introductory lessons once this COVID stuff finally gets off our thing. But thanks very much, Omega and George, for sponsoring the podcast. And without further ado, I'm so happy to introduce this gentleman. We've spoken once in the past, and we've been meaning to get this podcast happening. I'm just delighted to finally get him on. Would you please welcome Mr. Maor Appelbaum, Hebrew for source of light, as I've learned today. And I had to get it right because I didn't want to look like an idiot. So thanks for clearing that up before we got on the podcast, Maor. I really appreciate it. But welcome to the podcast, my friends. Beautiful to have you on.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. And thanks for pronouncing my name and not butchering it. I get that a lot. I got used to it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when you just look at it on paper, Maor is what I would have thought, but of course it's split up into Maor, and but I like the meaning of the name. It's cool, but I can understand how for some people, I think it's important to get names right, because even though a lot of people can be very diplomatic and smile through it, but after a while, I'm sure it would grate on you, and it's nice that people can get it right.
I got used to it, and I'll correct them. But I don't get offended if they call me mayor, like the mayor of the city.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's time to, but anyway, I got used to it. I don't make story of it. Some people, very, it's for important for them. I'll correct people, but I don't take it too hard. I understand that, the way it's read and the way it's written doesn't correlate the same with the actual sonics of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Maor, it's good to have you on, and it's you're one of those guys I've been wanting to speak to for a while, because you're, in the scheme of things, in the whole ecosystem of mastering on the planet, you are 13, 14 years now you've been mastering. Would it be roughly?
Audio probably 20 something. So
okay, but in your studio in Los Angeles, how long have you been operating out of there for now?
Probably in LA, close to 13,
okay.
12 years,
yeah.
Probably.
So you're not a newbie, but you're not a veteran. You're not someone who's been out of it for 30 odd years, but you're a guy that's on the rise, and you've been just killing it of late. You've just been going in leaps and bounds with what you've been doing. And, it's great to talk to the guys who are, legends, if you will, and have a lot of experience, and the veterans, but it's really nice to get to talk to guys who are on the up and up, and who are going to become the legends of the future, who are really establishing themselves and making their mark, and, showing what they're about. Now, tell us a little bit about your background. I know you were born and raised in Israel. Did your audio career start back there?
Yeah, again, like I said, I'm more than 20 something years in audio, and I was a broadcasting engineer for 8 years, and I've done kind of all around stuff, lighting engineering, some front of house, monitor, some rehearsals, some recording, it's kind of dabbling and also working, and but mastering is something I really wanted to do for a long time, and the area there was not filled with mastering. It wasn't yet the biz. There were only a few of them out, doing it, and not a lot of them were involved in different types of musics that were outside the country. So, like the rock from here, or prog, or metal, or So that's something I really wanted to focus on. And I took my, I don't know if you call it knowledge or experience or together of it both, but coming from the other side of the window of, production, I was a broadcasting engineer. I had a radio show. I was a DJ. I was a music journalist. Everything that is not production, in a way, that gives me, a different perspective, kind of like a presentation thing. And that fit really well with mastering because, if you think of it, we're the last area between the production, we're part of it, but we're the last section of that and the consumer. Yeah. Kind of like a fan of the music that has control on it.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a listener, can say, oh, I like it, but I like it more this way, that way. And, and we're less involved, we less have the drama.
Yeah.
We still have drama, but not the same drama. And so my background was kind of an all-around with it. And I did mastering in Israel, a lot of underground bands. And the genres that were not yet developed there in terms of the mastering. And so, and also, but I was a musician. I had bands of mine. I've recorded 40 albums of different projects of mine, experimental music, rock music, kind of metal music, goth, rock, industrial, whatever I liked and I could do, kind of.
Yeah. So what took you to America? What was the impetus that made you decide I'm going to go over to the West Coast and I'm going to, make my name?
I worked with a band from Israel. They were called Seek Irony. And they had a record produced by Sylvia Massey. They actually went to work with Sylvia up in California back then. And they were friends of mine. And I asked them, hey, can I master this? You know how it is.
Yeah.
A shot at it, and I did it. It probably didn't work on the first try. Second try, maybe third was a charm.
Mm-hmm.
And then they really digged it. And they say, wow, this sounds really cool. And so we talked more about it. And I started asking them about how they recorded, and they told me about Sylvia. And I knew records that Sylvia did because, back then, in the 90s,
Oh, she was killing it.
Music and, a lot of stuff she worked on. So I knew of. And plus, in Israel, we would get a lot of stuff from Europe. So bands like Kula Shaker and Skank and Nancy. And so those bands kind of penetrated, to our MTV from England, that came from England. So I got in touch with her and they said, I do mastering. I just mastered the Seek Irony stuff. And, that started a discussion. And then she offered me, she said, why don't you come here and work in my studio and do mastering?
Wow.
Probably anything else that's needed. And I was like, well, that's an option. And I was working still broadcasting, but I knew that in the summer I have a vacation, kind of a vacation. I can take it. And luckily, the whole project that I was technically managing, closed down after 7 years.
Wow.
I didn't know anywhere to go with that. So I was like, well, if it's closing down and I got the offer to come work for her, then I'll just jump on that plane.
Why not? The universe spoke to you, my friend. That's great. So what was it like? As someone who come to a country where obviously you'd made a connection with Sylvia, which is great, but how was it initially when you first landed and the experience of being in a new country and trying to adjust because the, Jewish culture and American culture are very, very far apart, even as a secular Jew. So how was when you landed? What was it like when you first arrived here and how did you get on your feet when you first got there?
Well, the first thing I noticed is, besides the difference between the Jewish secular culture, there's Israeli culture, which is very different. We are very upfront. We are very,
direct.
It's very direct and active, And so when I came, first of all, my English today is way better than before. But back then, a lot of terminologies were missing for me. And I would say something that means there's logic to what I'm saying, but in the normal English, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
like I remember one time I gave a towel to one of the resident engineers for the shower. I came to him and I said, "Here's a towel for the shower." He's like, "I don't need a towel for the shower. I need a towel to dry." Like, think of it.
Yeah.
For the shower. And it just didn't make sense. And then I'm like, okay, probably, and I still remember in Hebrew, we have a word to the meaning used to. I'm used to something. And I accidentally forgot the word used, and I kept saying regular. Regular to something. And people were just laughing. I was like, why are they laughing at what I'm saying? I'm just saying I'm not regular. I didn't know regular means bowel movements and all that stuff. Yeah. So, good thing is some of the clients, they understood that, and they joked with me about it. But it was, looking back, this is 13 years ago. There's a major difference between American mentality and I'll say Mediterranean, because this applies to other cultures also that are in Mediterranean countries. Huge difference between American mentality to Mediterranean.
How would you define them? How so? What are the major differences? Is it in work ethic attitude? Is it spiritual attitude? Is it like what are the things that you notice that are different? What have you observed that make it different to you?
To make it very simple, it's if I have to go from A to B, a Mediterranean mentality would go in a straight line, A to B. But American mentality doesn't go from A to B. It has stops in different places. It will get to B.
It's more multi-layered and just more steps. Was that what you're trying to say? Just more steps need to be taken?
Yeah, because it's less direct. So either the way things are mentioned, the way you speak, okay, it's more soft. Like directivity doesn't mean you're evil or bad, or you're just saying it as is in order to work together.
Mm-hmm.
But American mentality is a bit more soft, like in terms of you don't want to hurt anybody. And again, both will get from A to B, okay. But for a person like me who came from Mediterranean mentality, and in Mediterranean you also have different types of it. You have Greek, Italian,
of course, Spanish,
but
German,
exactly, Catalonian, which would be also in Spanish, and so coming from that place to here, I had to learn how to talk differently, so I won't be stepping on toes or injecting too hard.
Yeah, or potentially offending people without even realizing it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not trying to offend. I'm just saying what I'm saying. But there's a way to say it in American English, and in English, like from England, they also have a way to do it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
and that's also different than the Mediterranean. So it was a bit of a
culture shock, adjustment.
I don't want adjustment. Yeah, that's what it was. It was an adjustment period, and I kind of had to learn to understand what they're saying and give it the space.
Yeah.
And then also to know how to talk to them in a way that I don't sound like I'm giving a command.
Yeah, but too direct. And it's so important because, as you know, in our business, relationships is everything. And when you're dealing in a country or a culture where it's different to where you come from, and you're having to adjust, you're in their space, so you're the one that has to adapt and according to the ecosystem and to work in with them. They're not going to change for you. So that in itself, but we're adaptable as human beings, and after, I guess, I mean, even as someone that speaks English, and I went to Canada, I had to sort of change how I spoke too, because the accent for some people threw them right off. And so, I mean, for example, my name's Tony, but they thought I said I was tiny, as in small. And I said, no. So I said, oh no, you're not tiny, So, so just little things like that, and to the point where, when I came back here to Australia in '91 after being over in the States and Canada, trying to get into radio, it took me a long. I had, to Australians, I sounded like I was Canadian or American, but Americans knew I was Australian. There was this weird in between kind of a thing, and it took me some time to shake it off, because I couldn't get a job on radio if I didn't sound like, being back to being Australian again. So I had to readjust all over again. Anyway, tell us about your current gigs, where you are, whereabouts in the city are you, and how did you start up the studio? How did it all begin after? By the way, I bet that experience of Silver would have been invaluable for you to help you get set up from the start.
Well, when I landed there, at that time, her studio was a few studios. So we had an A, B, we had a few of them in different consoles, and bands would live there. And actually, a very famous Australian band lived there at that time. And so we all lived in the same place. And I was friends with them. We hung out a lot there. The band. They were very successful in Australia. They're called Cog.
Yep.
And so I actually worked on their second album, Sharing Space, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was actually mixing a bit there. I wasn't doing mastering on that record, but I was sharing mixing duties and assisting mixing there too. That was a good spot to kind of land and be in a hub, where you live with people, you make a connection, an actual connection, because you live with the people. It's not like they're going home and coming back and you sit for a few hours. No, we're all there. I mean, what's surrounding us? Mount Shasta. What's surrounding us? Forests.
Yeah.
So it was a very good place to land and to learn, the how do you call it, the connectivity of how people react in situations where they're not distracted by their everyday life.
Yeah, sure.
In the creating. So that was in Weed, California. And she moved since then to a different place. But that studio, Radio Star Studios, that's the one. And I worked there 24/7, like literally 24/7. I worked there every day from morning to night and weekends. And after 8 months, I moved to LA, in the Valley, which a lot of studios are here and people live here. And then I had a few different studios. This is the current one. I have this one for about 8.5 years.
Right.
Yeah, something like that. And I'm really happy with it. And then your question, sorry, I lost it. Current, gigs that I work with the band Yes. I do a lot of work with them. Done,
we mentioned earlier before the podcast. One of the things we talked about is every engineer has we all start as unknown quantities, and we start building our way up, and then we get to a we finally get a record that puts us on the map. That finally legitimizes us, if you will, in the perception of the industry or people like that. And so I know you work with, but to me, I think the album that really stands out for me is doing that Faith No More album. I thought that was a tremendous feather to have in your cap.
Hey, that's true. The Faith No More album I did was the last one, called the latest one, actually, to say, called Soul Invictus. That album was a comeback album.
Yeah.
So it was very important for the fans, and in general, I think the band didn't do an album for, I don't know, maybe 18 years or something, or 16.
Long time. Long time.
And they came back some years before for touring, but they didn't do an album. And we started out by doing singles that were later on remixed again, like mixed again and done differently in the album. 2 singles before the album. And yeah, that album was probably the one, and I'm honest about this, I don't have a problem saying this. I think that album put me in a spot where, although what I had before already had built something, like bands like Yes and Sepultura and Halford and Yngwie and all those, but once I did Faith No More, that thing just stick on, like, okay.
They really, yeah, and it would open the doors. It's funny how that works. I remember Howie Weinberg told me many years ago, because I was very frustrated as to, I was just trying and just I felt like I was going nowhere. And he just always said to me it was about what he called the home run. It's just a patience game, and eventually something will come your way that becomes a hit. Now, a record will become a hit for, it doesn't become a hit because of you or me, but we're lucky enough to get a Guernsey on the team. But nonetheless, you work on something and then it becomes a hit or gets a lot of notoriety or airplay. And then all of a sudden, in the perception of people, once they see, oh, who did it, they think differently about you. Now, you weren't any better an engineer than you were the week before, but in the minds of people and A&R, all of a sudden there's a legitimacy about you. Then all of a sudden they'll come and speak to you because, prior to that, it's like, well, who are we dealing with? Oh, who is this guy? What has he done? Now, from there you go to, oh, this is the guy that did this album. And then people are more inclined to listen to you and be more open to at least, giving you the opportunity. But that's how it works. It's not fair. Life isn't meant to be fair, but that's just the way it is. And it's a numbers game and it's a patience game. But when it does happen for you, then the responsibility comes to maintain and do better all the time. Just take your A game to an A+ game, and because then there's a perception that you're the man, but there's also the pressure that you got to keep delivering over and over and over. So,
I first of all, you're right. I also think that sometimes our A game changes, and when it changes, we get certain opportunities to prove them. So, like, we might get a gig coming in, but we're still not in our A game, so we're not getting it. And then we are in our A game, and that gig comes in, so it aligns, and then it comes out, it's like, oh, it sounds good, it's successful, and this is your time. You know what I mean? Because when I came here to America, and again, I work nonstop. I always try to improve my craft. It's like, for me, the passion is always there, and it's what I'm doing, and I remember each time I was doing a record of a band I knew, I was like, oh, I'm there, but no, it's not that you're there. You're always growing with it. So I was doing Rob Halford solo albums, and I was doing Yngwie and Sepultura and Angra, and later on, Yes and all. And each time I felt I'm growing. But as long as you're really growing, then these opportunities can really come in. And it doesn't mean that they have to be big. Like some of the records that I've done that brought me the most work were not big records.
Yeah.
But they were records that were affecting, let's say, a niche or
within a scene. Yeah, people took interest. People stood up and took it, paid attention to what was going on. The right people, and I think it's true. I think sometimes engineers they're worrying about a fan base as opposed to, it doesn't really matter to me if I'm not a household name within the music community as such, as more within an industry or within your peer group or within your clientele. So I think it's more important to be able to create an impact in that world, and if you can create interest, then that's when inquiries and potential gigs and, growth come from there. Maor, one of the things I've really admired about you, just watching you, online, is you're one of those few guys that are not afraid to talk about what they're doing, share what's going on, with the record you do, the successes you have, and while it's beautiful to be humble, and some people say, well, we're not online because we're just too busy to be online and what have you, but I do admire the fact that you're not afraid to put yourself out there, to promote yourself, to hustle, and to let the world know that you exist. Because I find that a lot of junior engineers that I mentor, they feel uncomfortable wanting to, have a social media profile. They worry about, oh, what are my peers going to think? I'm not going to look cool. I'm going to look like I'm desperate. I'm going to look all this stuff in their head, which is holding them back. And because I think in this day and age, it's, yes, people will do your bidding for you, and you build towards a word of mouth but I still think in the initial stages of as a young engineer, I think it's important that you get over that fear, that psychological thing that's holding you back, and put yourself out there. So what is it about you that makes you not as fearful, to put yourself out there like that? Because you don't see a lot of it.
I learned a lot of years ago that the term humble is very misplaced. A lot of people consider people who don't talk as humble. A lot of times they're not humble at all. They're just not talking, or they just don't want to communicate. Okay, they might even be the biggest snobs in the world, but people will give them the credit of being humble because they didn't name drop, or they didn't talk about what they're doing. And that's a big disconnect in the term of humble. Humble is really about respect. Humble is about you and I talking and giving us each other, you can tell me something and I'll be there. I'll tell you something, you'll be there. And it doesn't matter if I tell you about my successes or my failures. That's being humble, the mutual respect.
Yeah.
And I learned this a long time ago. And there's a lot of misconceptions that people think that, oh, if he's talking about himself, it's because he needs business. Why not? Does it matter? And if you're not talking about yourself and you don't need business, great. But when you do need business, are you going to talk about yourself or not talk about yourself? Okay? Same as the opposite. And then I see very, very successful engineers that never talked about themselves. Now they are. So again, we're in this place of, is this right or wrong? And it's all, doesn't have to do anything with right or wrong. You can talk about what you're doing. If you're a good person, you're still a good person. Didn't change anything. Okay, if you prefer not to talk, some people just like to be quiet. They don't like it. I'm not telling everything I do.
Yeah.
If I would do that, I wouldn't have time to sit online and start poking, or posting, or whatever you want to call that function. Okay, I do a lot of records all the time, but guess what? I'm not going to post each one. I don't have, it just, but at the same time, some of them, I just like to mention it. And if you look, I don't mention as much as other people mention, but I also learned another thing. You can show that you're working all the time, but it doesn't mean that people
you're actually working as well.
And it doesn't mean they're going to actually react to you, I am putting myself out there, and I think it's good because in today's day and age, the market is so saturated. Unless you have a feed form, like a relationship with a record label for 20 years or, or management, or then how would you get your message outside? I mean, look at the situation. I'll post a post about a record I've done, and I'll get people responding, say, oh, I didn't know you did that record. Of course they didn't know, because there's no credits online.
Yeah.
So of course, so does it really bring me work if they can't read who did it? No.
Do you think that's one of the things I definitely feel is missing, and it would be nice if well, look, at the end of the day now, it's a digital world, but I think it would be nice if there was everyone involved on a record. Like when we were growing up, we'd buy vinyl, or even on CDs, there would be, everyone from assistants, engineers, producers. I mean, even people that didn't really deserve to be on there sometimes got a mention. But I think it would be nice. I don't know if you could legislate it or make it, legal or what have you. But I think it would be nice if the average, someone goes on and hears something. Oh, wow, that sounds cool. Oh, who did that? And it would be nice if there was some metadata inclusion there or some way where, someone can look into a file and see the personnel, that was involved in, because that's back in the day, that's how it was. And that's how people got to know, oh, so-and-so did this record. We'll look him up. We'll find their management. We'll contact them. I think that would be good. Having said that, I think the flip side to that pancake is, when we do good work, as we alluded to before, about if people within our scene who ultimately are going to be potential clients through word of mouth know that, you did this and word gets around that way, that's the other side of the coin. But hopefully one day we'll see more credits for everyone.
I want to mention something. Back in the day, a lot of credits were not mentioned as well. And although some people assume that they were all of them, I can give you top names of mastering engineers on top records, and they're not credited there. And it's because a lot of those records were printed before it went to mastering, or it was an in-house work under the label.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
There's one record that if you go and look at the credits, you won't find the mastering guy. They have a plaque of it, and it's written later on somewhere. Well,
I think ever since, once we started seeing more and more independent mastering houses coming out, from probably early 90s, I guess, I think we started that sort of, we started seeing more and more credits. Because like when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't know what mastering was. I hardly ever saw a mastering credit on an album. In fact, the one time that I can remember seeing a mastering credit was for a guy called Wally Trudeau, rest in peace, who worked it was a Sammy Hagar record. It was sometime in the 80s, and he worked at a Capitol. That was the first time I actually saw what the term mastering was. And I thought, what's this? And so started my curiosity to delve into it and look more at it. So no, you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right.
If you're two that you know very well, and if you go to look at the credits, not online, on the actual album credits, you won't find them. And one of them is one of the telling one.
Well, did
Metallica, the Black Album.
Sorry?
Metallica, the Black Album?
Yep.
Doesn't have a mastering credit in it.
No. It was George Marino, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And even Hot Chili Peppers, Blood, Sex, Sugar, Magic?
Yep.
Howie Weinberg, and it's not even credited there.
Wow. How about that? I'm sure there's a lot of engineers would be able to, say, hey, I did that album. My name wasn't on it. So before
a lot of them. Rust in Peace by Megadeth. I mean, I can give you a ton of them. I also sit a lot of times with producers here, and then I ask them, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, it was this guy, it was that guy." Yeah. Some of it names you even don't even know of today. They're out of the biz.
Yeah. So tell me, before I just was asking you about the studio. So tell us about how the current situation started there. Tell us what you got set up, your toys, the things that you like to use. So tell us about the room, the setup, and how that evolved.
This room was designed by an Israeli acoustician named Jonathan Sheffer. He actually works now for Apple. So I don't know what he's doing. It's like all confidential. But he did the acoustic design here, and back then we didn't have the I didn't have the PMC speakers. I had different type of speakers, but these I have for about 8 years. Most of the room here is basically bass trapping and diffusion, and then my speakers, the IB1S, powered by a Bryston.
Yep.
And then this desk used to belong to actually a few mastering engineers before me, but the first one before me, which means the last one actually, is Dave Collins. This used to be his.
Oh, really? Okay. Shout out.
This wasn't.
Shout out to DC. One of my favorite human beings in the whole world. I love him. Yeah.
So this was his desk when he had the facility in Hollywood, Collins Mastering or something like that. It was, I think.
Yep.
And before that, it was owned by, I forgot who, but there were one or two other engineers. It's just one block. You can't take it apart. It's only a metal frame underneath.
Right.
Let me just clear here some papers and stuff. And then a lot of the gear that I have is custom made and custom modified. Designs that I'm involved with. I do stuff with Roger Foote from Foot Control System.
I know. I certainly know of him, and
So this is called the Workshop LTD MA. It's a saturator clipper and kind of a tonal shaper. And then I have another one called the Bench, which just makes things tighter without the need of much EQ. I have another one here called the Torch. And that's also kind of subtle coloration. And then I have the more colored stuff like the Electronaut M97. That's a mono unit, so I have two of them. And this is a custom unit designed by Chris from Handy Amps and me. It's a custom unit of us both. Some ideas that I had, ideas that he had. We prototyped, tried different things, and we got this thing called the Oven. This one is.
I noticed that you posted that online just recently. So tell us about that. What does that do, and what inspired you to want to create something like that?
The idea behind it was to get a color box, color vibe, mojo box, whatever you want to call it. That could be so subtle that when you set it up lightly, you won't feel you won't hear it. But when you bypass it, you'll feel something is very missing. And then to the point where you can drive it more and get more coloration, but have a lot of range. Working with a lot of coloration compressors, cues, and boxes, I noticed that I'm missing something kind of an in-between, something that you can dial and have more control. So this one has the tube area, which is the cook. And it has the bake, broil, electric, and gas. Those are kind of how you work the tube section.
Nice. Yeah, cool.
Then you have the temp, which is the solid state with the high and low. And then you have kind of tone shapers like mid, low, and high, and sizzle. Those are more to shape it later on. By the way, if you hear like noise, it's the fans of the computer.
Yeah, that's okay, man. It's all good. We'll get,
So basically, that's what I wanted. I wanted something that I can have plethora, or whatever you want to call it. Sorry for my English.
Plethora.
That I can go from really subtle high to go up to driven and aggressive and all that. So that was the thing behind it, and it actually works. We're actually that's the first one that we're actually gonna release together. In 2 months, and it's going to be like a build to order collaborative unit. The other ones are just for me. This one is something we're building. Faceplate is going to be a bit different because this is a prototype faceplate, so that's why it's the Oven LTD. The other ones will just have a better faceplate. The one underneath is the Magic Death Eye compressor by Ian from Capital.
Looks cool, man.
And this is an old. It's amazing. It's like a Fairchild in a way, but it's cleaner, and it's the cleanest with color compression you can have, I think. So it doesn't impart too much, but still has a good vibe to it. This is the old version where he had the mix wet dry, and he did some mods for me. The newer versions are black and they have EQ instead of the mix wet dry. So here also the Weiss EQ, it's kind of a common EQ, and
it's a pretty absolutely. It's one of those indispensables for a lot of places. Yeah. Have you tried the plugin yet? Have you had a listen to the plugin of it?
I tried the de-esser. I also have the de-esser. I tried that. I'm going to try the EQ. I've heard from the people I know that it really sounds good and like that. So that'd be interesting. I got so used to using this EQ
Yeah.
that, it's going to be interesting how to work it as a plugin. But you know what? Technology moves on, and it's okay. It's
No,
okay
it
to
does.
have it.
It is, and I think we need to adapt. With things. It's as much as I'm an analog guy and I love analog processing, but I think it'd be silly to not be open. Everything's a tool, man. At the end of the day, and this is where I've told people if I had to start from scratch tomorrow, if I had no money and I had to start again from scratch, there's no reason I wouldn't be able to work with a decent plug-in suite, and work on a laptop. Yes, it's not the same as having, a suite and a dedicated room and all the boxes. But I think in this day and age, the technology has moved in leaps and bounds, and it's exponentially getting faster and better and more analog-like. That there's no reason why you can't cut a record now and make it sound really, really good, in this day and age. In fact, I know.
Yeah, sorry, you were cut off.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, I know there's a lot of Chris Garinger, when on the podcast was telling me, straight up, he said, look, there's a lot of records that he'll do these days in the box. I mean, obviously, dependent on someone like him would, get a high, on average, a higher standard of mix. But regardless, he said, just because I got Sontec and this and this and this, I don't have to go there. He can very happily work in the box and produce a result these clients are happy with. So I think as someone like him, can say that in this day and age when he has these options available to him, I think that is an endorsement for, where digital's at these days. And, it's come so far. And I don't think we need to become purists or snobs, because, we're analog, we're valve, we're transistors, or all this kind of stuff, I think I love digital. I'd rather have a great digital rig than an average analog rig. Put it that way.
It makes sense what you're saying. In my case, a lot of I get a mixed bag, probably like a lot of other mastering guys, and to have these tools in front of me gives me the ability to give them more, because the plugins are great. I mean, you can get amazing results with them. I'm not saying no.
Yeah.
But I can say from my own experience, certain things I'll put here, they will sound better to me than certain plugins. And it's just because the way it's set,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And certain things, the plugins are not there exactly. Even like the Magic Death Eye, there is a plugin. It sounds great, but it sounds different than my version here, because my version is an older version and it just sounds different,
Yeah.
And has different settings, whatever. Even, like I want to show here something, like even a mastering console, okay?
Yeah.
Like the okay,
Mm-hmm.
that thing affects your way of working, okay?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It has a sound, and it's part of the workflow. Or maybe you see this one is now getting a lot of attention, the Whitestone P331.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a tube loading amplifier. That thing is very subtle, very, very hi-fi-ish, but subtle. Certain records, I put it on and I was like, wow, this just added what I needed. And in some cases, it's okay, but it's not like, not everything here will work on anything.
Yeah.
Everything has its own thing. Like, I'll give you another example. There's a box here that Ian from Magic Death I made for me, and there's only one of those, and it's kind of like, instead of compression, it just glues things without compression. Sometimes that's exactly what I need on the low end, and I can't get that from a plugin. Yeah. Not because plugins are not capable to bring the low end, but what it does on the glue there, I can't. Another example here, you see the Michelangelo EQ. That EQ is kind of known already around from handy amps. That thing has a specific sound, and sometimes that saves the record. Yeah, like I'll run something that doesn't have any body and I'm like, wow, I just moved the knobs and I was like, whoa, this just changed the whole record. So, I'm saying this because I get people, saying, oh, all the emulations today are much better and all. And look, they might be right that we have gone, 10 years before we couldn't have done these records the same way we're doing them today. We probably could work them, but not the same way.
Not the same way, yeah.
But if we give the respect, okay, this is another humbleness, okay? Give the respect to analog. Give the respect to the technology that's available in plugins, okay? And not dismiss any of them, okay? Then you could win, because it's getting the most of all the worlds. Okay, just a second. My dog is scratching the door.
That's all right. Bring the dog in. Let's introduce us to the mascot.
Okay. His name is Pato.
Plato?
Yeah, it means duck in Spanish.
Yeah.
Pato, don't make a mess here. Okay. It's how they say small things create big problems?
Yeah.
Pato, go, come here. Yeah. Okay, he'll come.
I miss having a dog, Maor. Let me tell you, I really, really miss having a dog. I'm hoping later this year I'll get myself a dog again. But I've always said dogs are the best people. They wag their tails and not their tongues. Oh, there he is. What is your Labrador? He looks like a fox terrier or Scottish terrier of some sort. Cross? Is he a cross?
He's a Lhasa Apso and a poodle.
Wow. Okay. So he probably doesn't shed any hair, right? Doesn't shed hair.
No.
Great. Yeah.
No. I sometimes have to cut the hair here.
Yeah.
Because I can't see where he's pointing his eyes to, like what he's targeting.
Yeah.
Because he can see through hair. I can't see through his hair.
Does he give you any pointers when it comes to anything above 20K?
Usually he has a thing where he'll sit here and then he'll come up as like, hey, you're wrong. Okay.
You need
a natural for that.
You need to boost it. You need to boost it at 35 megahertz.
That's why I ditched a lot of those EQs, because he was just coming to me all the time. It's like, hey, I'm here. I didn't call you. Yeah. Oh, I thought you did. So I ditched all the frequencies above.
Yeah.
But back to what we said before, I find that there is something I can say about plugins that is bad.
Okay.
And this is very important. And I'm going to say it directly.
Go.
If plugins would cost like hardware, people would less abuse the sound with them.
Right. Yep.
They would put less of them when it's not needed.
Yeah.
There are times that I get mixes and I listen to that. There's no life to the music. And then I call the client and ask them, do you by any chance, sometimes I guess the right one, sometimes I don't, but I ask, do you by any chance have this or this or this? And they'll be like, yeah, how do you know? I'm like, can you bypass it and just compensate a dB or two or half on what's lost and tell me how it sounds? And they'll call me back and say, wow, now it sounds better. And the reason for that is they have all of it. They just put it in. And the thing is, they get the wrong education, because when you see a big name use something, you have to remember the big name uses it in his context with his tracks by his way of working.
Yeah.
His clients.
Yeah.
Just because he's using 20 or whatever, 10 or whatever, you can't apply that to your method. It's like me telling you have to eat a certain food all your life, and then you would be surprised you have deficiency of something. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has to have his way of working. He can learn from others. You have to be proportional to your growth.
Agreed.
And I think it happens in hardware too, but the thing is, to have a lot of hardware, you've got to buy a lot of it, right? Yeah,
absolutely. I think people get very excited as well when all of a sudden, young kids who it's marketing and hype and whatnot, and they have accessibility now to, like, just to give you some context, the first plugin that I ever had was a Waves Q10 graphic equalizer, right? Using it on a sound tools. Yeah. And that was like $1,000 back then, which, sorry?
It was the first plugin by Waves.
Yeah, exactly. And, it came on a floppy disk, and you want it in there. And, and I think it was a really big deal at the time. And I think then there was the C1 and then the L1 from memory, if I recall. But, things were rolled out slowly, and, you got a chance to get used to working with this new tool and understanding its limitations and what you could do. And I think now with so much stuff available, which is, look, I think the fact that we live in a world right now where we have so much access and accessibility and affordability, I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful that we have that. The downside is that, unfortunately, people don't spend the time to get to learn each piece of equipment and really get familiar with it and learn how to use it, not just in the way it's probably designed for, but also in ways that you wouldn't think you could use it, and I think the beautiful thing about, I built my system over a long period of time, but each time I got a box, I had a good extended period of time to get to learn what this box did, what it could do, what its limitations were, find unusual ways to use it, that you wouldn't normally think. Usually they were the happy accidents. Oh shit, what happened there? Oh wow, I didn't realize that happened, and these are all these happy, but again, you don't get to experience those things unless you're with that one piece of gear, and you're forced to take it to the limit and beyond, to learn about the those little added extra things that other people think is genius, but it just comes through, spending the time and getting to and learning how to become. I've always said it's more important to be resourceful than to have resources. And, I tell kids, don't worry about the fact if you don't have every plug-in or every bit of outboard gear. Learn how to use the stuff, learn how to get good at those things, become competent, and then just build your library, build your rig, and then your repertoire of skills from there. And it's a much more sustainable way of doing it. But being the world that is, kids, I know I was younger once, and I know it was like, I want it quick, I want it now, I want it, I want to have it this instant. So I get it. That's the conundrum that we find ourselves in.
I think another thing that is good to take in consideration, there's a lot of techniques, tons of them, and because there's a lot of them, to be proficient in them, really proficient in them, takes a long time. And during the study of those techniques, a lot of times people lose attention to the musicality. Yeah. And that comes from, we have knowledge, but our knowledge is always going to be limited because there's always more. And sometimes we have to know where to stop learning more a bit and focus on how we take that more in a wider way. Like, okay, if I learn now another technique, that's going to take time for me. Or I can just listen more to what I'm doing, how it affects the music, and see if I do need that technique or not. If you interview 10 mastering guys that are all, great at what they're doing, you'll find that some of them don't even know or use techniques that the others do and getting amazing results, while others know totally different techniques. But they're all proficient in their way of working because instead of just learning techniques, they got busy finding what works musically with their technique. Refining the same technique. Kind of like, repetition is not just doing the same thing. Repetition is growth too. Because
it's the Tony Robbins said, repetition is the mother of skill. And you only get good at doing something over and over and over again till you get that level of proficiency where you're unconsciously competent. You just do it without thinking. You just boom, know how to make decisions, know where to go. But again, that just comes through time and effort.
Right.
There's no shortcuts there.
Right. It's like, there's a saying in the Army. We have a saying. It says, it's hard in practice it's easy in combat.
Hmm.
And it's because you do the practice so much, and it's very draining for me, very hard when you get to combat, even though in combat there are other elements. Doing it out of violence already.
Yeah, same thing. Martial artists say: train hard, fight easy. You know, so same sort of thing. You know, it's understanding your fundamentals and just doing them so often that they become second nature. They just become, you know, part of your muscle memory, and I think that applies in mastering too. One of the times I saw that in action was seeing, you know, Vlad Ormella when he was working back at Sony. You know, it's back in the 90s before he went to Universal. And great lesson he taught me was, he said, you know, let the song speak to you, and allow it to dictate. And then obviously once you know, and I was just watching Vlado master, and he was so casual and so smooth, and so it really was like poetry in motion, man. And he mastered this record in it seemed like no time at all. Now, the mix was probably fantastic to start with, or, you know, but it was just this immediate knowing where to go, what to do, how much to do, and also not to do too much. You know, sometimes there's a tendency, because we have an ability and we can flex our muscle on something because we want to impose something we want to show the client, you know, oh, look at what we can do, you know, to show dramatic improvement. But sometimes, you know, that's not required. And to have, I don't know whether it's ego or what it is, but or experience, just to sort of know, okay, that's it. That's enough. That's all it needs. And to be subtle and just let it out. I think it was Bob Ludwig said to me once, the best compliment he would get from a client is when they get it back and play it on their system and go, it sounds the way I remember it, but it's just a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the best compliment you can get in terms of how subtle and effective you are. In other cases, you know, people will be like, oh, it sounds way better than I got, or, you know, I can tell you from, you know, the type of work that I get, because it's a mixed bag of sometimes niche styles,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we got to a place where I get 30 mixes that are sounding the same from 30 different people.
Wow.
And it's my job now just to make them sound different. They sound exactly like they're all copying same types of mixes.
Yeah.
Then I need to color them, vibe them, mojo them, radiant them, vibrant them, whatever you want to use the terminology, and to make them differ. And it's not that I have a special skill at this. It's just that we got to a point where if they produce this result, I have to divert it a bit enough so it will stay what they did, but it will have the identity they needed.
Yeah.
And this could be even other mastering engineers. Just a second. Paco wants to go out. Okay, well, free country. Yeah. So, and I think, you know, I get a lot of questions on this, like, hey, how do you know what to do? You know, it's like probably you get this every day. How do you know what to do? And one of the things I mentioned is that sometimes doing the right thing is the wrong thing, because fixing a problem can create a new one.
Sure.
And it's enough that you'll make these really surgical EQs of fixed little stuff, and then the song just lost the energy that it had, or lost the emotional impact.
Yeah.
And it's due to you doing right, but
yeah,
it's wrong at that moment. And I had times where, like, I would get a band come in and I would listen to, you know, to the music, and I was like, okay, you guys sound more 90s than today. I think you're better off sounding 90s than today. It will sound more connected with what you're doing. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I know these are probably your influences. I kind of guess in a way. Sometimes I'll hit the mark, sometimes halfway or whatever. And then I'm like, and this sounds like this era. Why don't we take the record that era, and it will sound like it came from then? And then you do that, and hopefully it was done right. But when it happens, immediately it gives them a connection to what they're listening to, not what they sound like, but what they're listening to in terms of the vision that was supposed to be there. It was kind of blocked by let's be modern, or this is the tools we have today. And I call it aesthetics. Okay. So I think that's also important, because there's records that go out there to somebody and he does an amazing job, but they're like, we don't know why we don't like it. Okay, now, so, you listen to it and like, well, EQ is good, balance is good, dynamics are good, or crushed, or whatever's needed, but you're trying to find what they are not happy with. And what they're not happy is they're romanticizing about something. And then, my daughter.
Hey.
Yeah. By the way, this is Eden.
Hey, Eden. Hello.
My daughter.
Beautiful. How old is she?
She is 4 years old.
Gorgeous.
And I have a son named Noam, but he's now playing.
You can tell she gets her looks from her mother.
Yeah. And she got the looks from her mother, and she has my approach to directivity. Dad, open this. Okay,
yeah.
I did.
Yeah, she's got some attitude.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to where we were, that's why also I think it's very important to have an open communication.
Definitely.
With a mastering guy, and not be afraid to say, hey, can we talk? And also the mastering guy doesn't always have to hold back and like, okay, let's give them what they want. And, they can just knock on the door or whatever, call the phone and, hey, let's talk about this and see what's possible. Because, it's very, very important that expectations are met.
Yeah. And I think also the expectations to be met, but also expectations to be managed. Because I think even in this world today with forums and the internet and information and more stuff out there, I still find that there are, some people that still find a little bit of a mystery around what we do. And for me, I hate that whole black art method. To me, it's pissed me off from as far back as I can remember. It's, we work in a part of the industry that, never has had a lot of prestige or profile, and I don't know that we don't work in it because we're seeking prestige or profile or notoriety or fame. We love what we do, but nonetheless, it's still something that people don't really understand fully. And I think some engineers like to use it to their advantage because, with a little bit of fear in people, you can control them. That we have a certain skill, we have a certain thing that you almost think they're like they're a bloody neurosurgeon. We cut records. We're not saving lives here. But I think it's important that we educate people, we lift the lid, we show people what we do, we explain what we do, because like you said, it's communication and relationship. And the more I can inform my client about what I can do, what I can't do, that's going to help them make a better mix, because they're not going to say, oh shit, we'll just let that go because we'll let Maor take care of it, no, we know what he can do. So we're going to go back to the mix. We're going to fix this up, so that we can get the most out of the mastering process. And I think that only can happen when you communicate, you open up the doors, and you don't feel insecure in thinking that someone's going to steal your job or take away anything from you. If you're good at what you do, you're good at what you do, period.
Regarding the black art, it's okay if it's considered a dark art or black art or not an art. In the end of the day, music is music, sound is sound. It's all artistic, okay? If somebody says, oh, it's magic what you're doing, okay, then it's magic. It's magic what the musician is creating as well, right?
Yeah. Mm.
So, but do we know how the musician does it? No, we don't.
Not exactly, but at least we can see what's going on. We can look at an artist play and we can see, okay, that's the guitar, that's the drums, this is what they're doing. the nuance of it all is what we maybe don't know. But I think in terms of mastering, because we're just so out of the loop, we're so out of sight, from the process. And look, I agree with you. If people want to believe you've done something magic, well, that's great. And if that adds to their perception of the value of what you do, then that's great. But I'm not trying to trivialize what we do or downplay it or anything like that. It's just about putting things in perspective. And for me, the more musicians can know what the process is and how we go about it, I think that's going to help them make better records. Because at the end of the day, all I care about is the final result. And whatever we need to do to create that, to get the result, who cares whether I'm the guy that made it sound better than anyone? You know what I mean? I'm just a part of a team here. But the more we can understand the process of what's going on, then we have we've got better dialogue. We can ask better questions. We're going to get better answers. And ultimately, what counts is when you hit play at the end of the day. And that's where the magic is. So long as we can get to that point, that's all that really matters ultimately, as far as I'm concerned. The end point, the output, the result.
Right. And I think that sometimes people are trying to understand how things are done, but just like you can't get in somebody's head and understand how he wrote the lyrics or wrote the music. Just a second, I'm opening the door here.
It's all good, man.
And yeah. So yeah, my dog. Sorry for.
No, that's cool, man. All good. All good. Not a problem.
It's a wild. Just like we can't understand what's going in their head, people don't have to understand what's going in our head. Because, like you said, it's part of a team. Even the assistant engineer is going to affect how a record's going to be sounding, because if he patched something or he knew how to edit something, we're all part of this big
picture
resource that create. I like to look at records as future history, because the record is done.
Yeah.
But it reflects on things that come up later on.
Yeah.
So, sorry again, and my dog is like, "Come on, Patu, come on." Okay, just a second. Yeah, you probably will edit every of those, and they'll see me jumping all over.
Oh no, I don't edit shit, man. It's these podcasts.
You don't edit shit.
No. Listen, this is just real life. This is how it is. It's like there's no dramas, I
love it.
This is life, man. This is life, warts and all. Warts and all. We want to keep it real.
Right, and I'm like that too. So when I work on a project, there like sometimes a band gets in touch with me. Hey, we want to work on something. Like they have an EP or an album. When we get closer to actually closing the details, sometimes I'll just say, hey, what's your number? Or here's my number or my Skype. Like I like to have multiple ways of communication. So I'll use Skype, WhatsApp, the Facebook Messenger, texting, email, and I'll have a discussion with them just to make sure we're on the same
page,
path. In some cases it's not needed, and I can work with what's there. In some cases it's a certain niche and they want something in that niche, an aesthetic, or I get a mix that is well balanced but doesn't have the vibe yet of what they're looking for, and that's where we need to talk. So I won't take it to the wrong place. I will take it to what fits. So I might ask questions, or I'll just tell them, hey, what do you have in mind? Some cases it's just a gut feeling, which hopefully works, and I'm always open to suggestions. If somebody says, hey, could you add this or that? If it's okay, we'll add it. If it's too much, I'll say, look, I think it's too much. I think it should be this way, but if you insist, we'll do it.
Yeah.
There's always a place where you want to meet with the client. Sometimes what they want is not the greatest thing. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's workable. And you want to have the best of it. And if they still insist on something less good, it's their record. You're involved with it.
Yeah.
But we're not getting royalties on this. We're just getting work for hire.
That's it.
I did it. What it is.
Yeah, that's
right?
it. So, Maor, just before we wind up, because we're getting that point now, we'll have to put an end. I could talk to you for quite a while, man. You're an interesting cat, and I like your approach, and I like your attitude, and I like how you roll, man. And but we're just at that time left to roll out. So just before we do, sorry to cut it at this point, but can you just curious for any young aspiring engineers who have aspirations towards wanting to master, what are a few things that you would share with them, practical things that they can do that doesn't require them to build a room or spend a lot of money? So what are some things you suggest in order to maybe to build their listing skills, or even to in a basic thing to try and get themselves up and running? What are some of the things you'd suggest for young guys or girls who want to have a go at mastering themselves? What to do?
I think it's good to have a strategical way of moving forward, and instead of just trying to eat it all, build a path, like actually plan it in a way. Usually when people ask me, what do you think I should do in order to get clients or stuff like that, or promote, or I usually say, find the niche that you're naturally connected with, that either the people who operate it, the bands, the
scene, the movers and shakers within that, within that pond.
Go to that place. And then the second thing is, it's okay to be pigeonholed.
Pigeonholed, yeah, you got it right. Yep.
A lot of times people look at it as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, because if you do everything, it's going to take a long time till you make it, because nobody will know exactly what you do. And then, if a record comes potentially your way and they don't know if you do that genre, they're probably going to stick to something else you did because that became successful.
Yeah.
So although, an example of me, I do a lot of different styles, but there's more of certain styles that I'm known for. So, and it's not because I know that genre more. It's just That's
where you got success. You got success there, and the perception, as we talked about earlier on. Yeah.
Right. So I think that focus on what you really connect with scene-wise and musically, and become really good at it. And what will happen is you'll start to gravitate people of that genre or sonic style. Like they'll be like, oh, I love the bass of this guy, or I love and it's just going to bring in those people to you. And in time, that amount will grow, and it will become like he's the guy, or, in your local scene. It doesn't mean you can't progress to other scenes, but if you stay a while in that scene for a big time, you'll probably get known even outside that scene just because you put a name.
Yeah.
And then somebody will talk with you, and you'll be like, hey, yeah, let me have a, try at this one. And then if you'll hit it good, or maybe halfway, and then you'll make changes and it will come out good, then you'll open up another possibility. I think that it's better to focus and really hit the mark there, and then expand, than try to eat the whole
smorgasbord. Yeah. Got it.
Exactly. I can tell you from somebody who tried eating it, but at the same time I did focus. That's one of the things that I recommend. And the second thing I do recommend, and this is an easy and hard at the same time, is don't try to fix a problem by layering a lot of things. Focus on what is good in the track that you can pull out. And a lot of times, and I've shown this to people, it's enough to put an EQ and a limiter and just focus on the right element in the mix to bring up or subtract what's needed, and you'll get a much more musical sounding master than trying to fix a ton of issues with all these very powerful plugins and just skew the whole thing. Try simple first and improve it. Then just overpowering it with a ton of stuff that will just overcomplicate the situation.
Yeah, sure. And just take you away from the integrity of the mix and the intention of, you know, what the artist was trying to portray. Just that the vibe is just completely, you know, just disintegrated at that point. Great advice there, Maor. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today, buddy. Thanks for taking time out. We had a couple of false starts, but we finally got there. And thanks for sharing, you know, your philosophies and your views and your story. I think it's amazing, you know, that someone can come from a foreign country with very little or no language and make their mark in, you know, what's a very tough and competitive market, being in LA. And, you know, congratulations on your career so far, and kudos to you, brother. And I wish you sincerely just continued success in what you do. I think you're destined for bigger and better things as time goes on. And it was a real pleasure speaking with you today, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I think it's great that you're doing this. And I watch a lot of what you post on Facebook, you know, the videos where you're talking with the musicians and engineers. And it's good to have that because, you know, we're all, if you think of it in the big picture, we're all in quarantine.
Yeah.
And we need some outside air.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, mate. I appreciate that a great deal. Take care of yourself. Be well. And we'll be talking to you real soon, no doubt.
Thank you.
Good on you, mate. Thanks again to my sponsor, Omega MMA, BJJ, wrestling, kickboxing, all that kind of combat stuff, and 6 Down Street, Collingwood. We should be back training very, very soon. I certainly hope we're getting nearer and nearer. But if you want to come down and check it out, whether you want a bit of fun and fitness or you want to fight at a elite level, come down, be trained by George. He's a UFC veteran. He's the real deal. He's a great teacher. He's a tremendous bloke. We're a friendly bunch down there. Come down, get 2 free lessons to see if you like it. I'm sure if you do, you'll come and stay. You'll love it. So thanks again to George and Omega for sponsoring the podcast, and thanks again to Maor for being on with me. And I'm out, as I always say, please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you, crazy kids, and we'll see you on the next podcast. See ya.